Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of Perk Africa. The recording has been inconsistent because I'm trying to get my enterprise off the ground. So every day is a hustle, making products, making prototypes, and trying to really make things that work before even piloting. So that has been time consuming, but this platform is my baby, and I believe we learn more through conversation. So I will keep it going. And like I said at the beginning, the frequency will be once weekly. And I think that will work to also accommodate the other work that I'm doing that is time consuming more than this. So in discussing one of the topics of interest, culture, I wanted to discuss something that has to me proven that culture truly is dynamic. On this episode, I'll be talking about sex through the lens of our generation. I contacted 11 young people, all under 30, 5 female and 6 male, to get their opinion on casual sex, sex within a non-marital relationship, and sex as a sacred activity. I will admit, I had my own preconceived notions of how the responses will be, and man was I wrong. Before we get into that, I want to discuss a bit on the history and evolution of sex, specifically between males and females. In the somewhat limited research I did, it was fascinating to learn how sex has evolved, not only in how it's initiated, but also in its purpose. Take it many generations back, sex is solely a procreation tool, a duty by women to their husbands. There's little, if not no, emotion attached to it. There's little emotion attached to relationships and men being faithful and men always protecting women's feelings. They don't even expect it, so it's not something that particularly hurts them. Women are also restricted from having it of their own accord, not because of emotion, not because men are jealous, but for lineage purposes. Men did not want the possibility of raising kids who aren't their own. Then take it decades back. Emotion is involved. Women are still shunned, yes, should they engage in random sex. But commitment is now an expectation by women from their men, and lack of it is seen as betrayal. Then let's fast forward to 2021. This topic came to me following a private conversation in which a friend mentioned wanting to sleep with a prostitute with such ease. I then suggested he do not do that because of, in my opinion, the bigger implications of sharing that part of yourself with just any random person. My response was followed by an eye roll and an implication that I might be one of those meaning implying like those staunch Christians who want to restrict people from making choices and having fun, of which I'm not. I thought extensively about this issue, so I decided to poll young people specifically to get the perspective on casual sex and its greater implications. I will start with opinions from men because that was not expected, and for me did not correlate with what I seem to see as the reality on the ground. Of the 6 men I polled, only one said that he likes casual sex and actually prefers it. He believes it's a relationship sustainer and does not see it as a sacred thing, just a pleasure and procreation tool. 5 of the men, however, felt very differently, and there were 5 men from 5 different African countries, and they had a similar opinion. They thought differently to that other one guy. They believe sex is sacred, should be respected, and not done randomly with just anyone because of an urge. One comment in particular said, "Every day we're building and practicing for the life we want to ultimately live. It's not possible to live life not committing and sleeping around randomly with just everyone when ultimately you want a love life with commitment and consistency." So 5 out of 6 men interviewed were staunchly against casual sex. Speaking to women was even more interesting, mostly because as a woman, that's where most of my preconceived notions lie. 2 of 5 ladies dislike it, but one because of the attachment issues that come, especially for women. The other because the lack of commitment opens the door to a possibility of diseases. The other three were uniform in that they believed that as long as there's consent and agreement to terms, then casual sex is okay. I will actually read one of the comments from one of the women, which I found very, very interesting, and I found it worthy to read. I engaged with her, and on the tail of her comment, I will close with my own opinion. This is what she said. I think, like all things, if it's done with consent and the person's making the decision, I'm making the decision from a secure state of mind, then it's fine. If adults agree to fulfill each other's urges with no strings attached, there's no problem. Only issue is if that agreement is based on underlying unhealthy psychological frameworks, such as sex addiction tendencies, daddy issues, trying to change an unrequited love, then it can be a problem. Hence, emphasis on both partners being psychologically stable and pragmatic enough to be ready for most possible outcomes, such as pregnancy, diseases, or even an unplanned emotional connection. I will close off her comment with this. Her particular thought process really stuck with me because after I read it, the question that popped into my mind was, what is a healthy psychological framework? Anything that makes you doubt yourself, anything that creates self-dislike can induce an unhealthy mind framework because it affects the way you see yourself. I do not believe the majority of people engaging in casual sex have daddy issues or horrid sexual abuse stories in their past. I am convinced if engaging in casual sex requires a sound mind without self-doubt and from people sure of themselves, then I'm convinced no one doing it should be doing it. Personally, I do not believe in casual sex. And also because of the fleeting nature of relationships in our generation, I don't believe in sex with a non-marital relationship either. Not anymore. You can look at the results of my poll and either come to a conclusion that there's a disconnect between how women think men think of sex and how men actually do think of sex. You could also look at this as women having been empowered and in full control of their bodies, because from the poll you can see the men are a bit more reserved, conservative, and it's the women who are like, sure, do it if it's what you want, do it, it's your body, do it as long as there's consent and nobody is being forced, just do it. And the men are more like, it doesn't matter, you shouldn't do it, it's something, or at least most of the men, 5 out of 6, it's something that's sacred. I, however, really have a problem with this third wave feminist talking point of just do it if there is consent or do what you want with your body. The talking point of women doing whatever they want with their bodies because men have always been allowed to do it. It's too men-centered for me, and that does not seem like liberation. They hate conformity to what they deem men-set standards, and yet their whole mission is to be more like men. Be allowed to walk around topless because men can. Be allowed to sleep around with whoever, whenever, because men can. Promiscuity, cannot be shamed in women because it has not commonly been shamed in men. So you need a liberation from men's standards, but everything is still men. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson once said something to the effect of, if you wouldn't want to date or end up with a man who's promiscuous and sleeps around with everyone, why aspire to be like him? Clearly you don't want to end up with that type of guy because you see those traits as undesirable, and they truly are. Obviously, I'm not trying to judge. I've been a feminist. I've fallen for the line of thinking of I can do whatever I want with my body, and to this day I'm recovering from some of those choices. I remember in my journey of self-awareness and introspection, whenever I'd share with a lady who was just like me, who had slept with whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted, whenever I'd share with them that in those moments, I never really felt the power that we women were supposedly reclaiming through these acts, that it always felt like a surrender of self to mostly people who weren't worth it, that secretly I just wanted to be loved and listened to and someone who was really choosing me, and that the tough exterior and words were a front. Anyone that I would tell that who had been like me would agree that it was always the same for them. 100% of them agreed. You're not empowered when doing things you don't really want to do and faking orgasms for a dude you claim to be reclaiming the power from or trying to prove you're equal to. I will end with my friend Brian's words. He said, the majority of problems in our society, the brokenness of families, and the rising rates of single motherhood are because people do things like casual sex and they find them normal. I agree with Brian. I agree that there are larger implications for our societies that come with these ideologies that we adopt. And I believe that there's a way to look at it because definitely there's a huge disconnect between what men want and what women think men want. And it is silly to say women are not doing things for men when even in their rebellion, they're rebelling against men. So everything you do will always be men-centered. And yet that rebellion, you're doing it with your body, things that affect you. So that's my opinion, what I think. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What